Okay. This one might go a little long. I've got a lot to say on this next joint. So
Julie's got she may have she may bring a cup of tea up. Okay. I'll just keep going if she does.
yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's go. Yep, do it.
Okay. Hang on. Metronome's on.
Metronome. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's that stupid thing on GarageBand.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, welcome to the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast. This is episode 108, which is unbelievable. The tension, I can barely get out the phrase, Tokyo Jazz Joints top 10. No, I told you. Tokyo Jazz Joints, top of the pops, top 10 countdown. Number 3, had to work backwards from 8 there. 108, episode 108. Let's try that again.
I thought you were, wait,
Okay,
Philip,
welcome.
I thought you were about to do the way you were so excited there. It sounded like you were about to do the old darts announcer. 180.
108. Oh, everybody groans because they're 72 points short. Okay, welcome to the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast, everyone. This is episode 108, which means that it is number 3 in the Tokyo Jazz Joints Top of the Pops Top 10 countdown. We are inching closer to that top spot. I'm sure you are on the edge of your seats, unless you sit on the floor, in which case you're moving forward slowly on your knees. But either way, the tension is palpable. I'm sure people can hardly wait to find out what our first, our number one choice is, if you haven't already guessed. But we're going to kick off today with our number 3 choice. And James, in the spirit of, playing nicely, I started last time, so you're going to go first this time with your number 3 choice. And I have absolutely no idea what it's going to be, but I desperately hope it's not the same as mine.
I would put really good odds on it not being. So really good
Even
odds.
better. Okay.
Yeah, on it not being the same. Yeah. Okay, well, so last episode we were in downtown Fukuoka, lovely area of Tenjin. We talked about Jab, one of the all-time great like Uber jazz kisa. Today we are heading to the extremely unthriving metropolis of Takanabe City, which is located in Miyazaki Prefecture on the southeast coast of Kyushu. Miyazaki, we've talked about on previous episodes, a place that I have a sneaking suspicion you may be talking about in downtown Miyazaki. But here, this is not in Miyazaki City. It is in Takanabe, which is near the coast, famous for being the location of a Japanese Air Force base and a couple of like overseas tech companies. Pretty much that's all that's going on there. Current population, 20,000. So on my trip to Miyazaki several years ago, I think, Philip, we were talking in the last episode where I had gone to Kochi, your pick, Mokuba. I'd gone there during the COVID lockdown. Miyazaki was another one. I went, domestically, they were trying to promote domestic travel in Japan because the borders were closed because all the tourists were not here. So you were able to get really cheap tickets. I flew to Miyazaki for 6,000 yen, if you can believe that.
I live in a world of budget airlines.
Oh, that's true. You're from the Ryanairs homeland. Right? They kind of suck though. But anyways,
6,000 sounds quite expensive, actually. But anyway, go on.
So flew down to Miyazaki, checked out the joints in Miyazaki City, and then the next day took a train along the coast to Takanabe, and then got out at what must be easily the loneliest train station I've ever seen in Japan. There's not even a convenience store outside of it. I mean, and there's convenience stores everywhere in Japan. So I had to get a taxi, and it drops me off at this just small, like sort of like little street that's really surrounded by nothing. But amazingly, there's like 12 to 15 different snack bars. And what I learned later was it was because in Takanabe, like because you've got these like 3 sort of like big foreign entities plus the Air Force thing, like that's where all the people who work there drink. And located on one of those is the, indescribably weird and wonderful Dolphy. Now we talked about, you mentioned on the last episode when you picked Mokuba, there's like 3 Mokubas that we went to. I mean, Dolphy's, I think that there's 7 in Japan. I lost count actually, because I mean Eric Dolphy is just a legend here, but nobody has taken it to the level of Fujisawa-san, the wonderfully quirky owner of Dolphy. I think I've mentioned before on the podcast, the Instagram picture I've taken that has by far the most views and likes is a picture of the owner of Dolphy, Fujisawa-san, standing outside the shop, but he's got the metal grate pulled down, and the metal grate is just the entire cover of Out to Lunch. And I don't know who made it. I don't know who drew it. It's a perfect replica of the album cover, and he's just standing there.
I know how much it cost.
You know how much it cost? Oh wow, we didn't get into that conversation.
It cost him 200,000 yen.
That's
he told me that.
That's actually a bargain. That's a bargain.
No, back then it was probably a fair bit of money, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just such a, you know how much, and our listeners definitely know how much I love signs, awnings, the whole, like, you know, all those like sort of extra things to the jazz case. I just love them. The matchbooks, the phones, all of those things. When I saw that sign pulled down, I insisted that he come out and pull it down for me so I could take a picture. Dolphy is just insane. The full name of Dolphy is Scotch Pub Dolphy, and he has scotch. I mean, he's got all of the sort of rare special edition brews of Glenmorangie, Bruichladdich. What's the really peaty one from Islay? Laphroaig? Is that how you pronounce it? Laphroaig, I think.
Laphroaig, yeah.
Laphroaig, yeah. He's got, I mean, I had written down in my notes, not bottles. This is different types of scotch, that he's got 62 different bottles, 62 different types of scotch. So obviously his connection to a dealer who's shipping it directly from Scotland is incredible. He's also, I mean, you know, because again, we've talked about when you go to these regional places, they're so much larger than any of the places in Tokyo or Yokohama. Dolphy's really, really big. Okay, he can fit about 60 people in there, and he does do live gigs. He even plays guitar. And as a guitarist, on one wall are, I think he's got 7 Rickenbackers and Gretsch. I'm not a guitarist, but that's what they've got in the notes. I think that's right. Like the sort of like hollow body guitars that rockabilly guys and jazz guys play, Gretsch and Rickenbacker guitars. He's also got an entire like glass covered sort of shelf full of toy cars, model toy cars that he built, you know. So the guy obviously has a lot of different interests. So when I was
forget the guns.
The guns, yeah, you know, I'm an American. I'd rather not talk about the guns. Also, well, the fishing.
You're not an American. You're not an American in that case.
Hey, guilty as charged. I mean, I'd love to come back, and there's no way I can do it. I'll focus on the fishing. Okay, the fishing equipment. The guy's a huge fisherman. And as we got into it, after I did the usual spiel, you know, because he was another guy who was just like, oh, did you call me a few days ago? And I was like, yes, I did. Because he opens during lunchtime because he cooks up curry lunches, okay, for all of the workers around there. And he's really, really into like cooking, you know. And then he opens again in the evening as the jazz bar. So I said, yeah, I'm the one who called you. And I was asking about the hours. And he was like, oh, okay, you know. And so, you know, I gave him the usual Tokyo Jazz Joints spiel. And then he, you know, we got into it. He told me all about like how he got into jazz, but he's also a huge rock fan. He showed me his collection of Beatle albums and King Crimson albums. He's got a whole bunch of classic rock on there as well. And then he started telling me a little bit about the place and about how, well, you know, like basically like he's got his local customers and you've got the people who just come out to drink, but then you've got the people who are really into jazz, the people who sort of his crew. And he shows me a scrapbook. He pulls out a gigantic photo album full of pictures through the years. And my favorite one, and again, it ties into the fishing equipment you see on the wall in there. They're sitting outside Dolphy with a barbecue grill, just grilling up all this fish that they caught earlier in the day. And I mean, all I could think about was like, man, this is just, I'm so far from Yokohama now. Like, this is just like a different planet, you know? So these guys are there grilling up the fish that they caught all day and then going inside and drinking scotch and listening to Eric Dolphy or whatever, or King Crimson. The best story about Dolphy has to be, though, that he said, well, you know, we're a small town in Takanabe, but like the mayor, he's a good customer here. In fact, the first time we heard of him was because we were having a jam session. And he just came in one day and jumped on the stage and started playing his horn, but none of us knew who he was. So he just jumped up and started jamming with us.
Oh my
finished
God.
finished the tune, nodded, and then left. And then a year or two later, he came by and he's like, "Hey, I'm running for mayor. And, also, I brew my own shochu. Here's a bottle." This is the kind of place we're talking about, right? Deep in Miyazaki, the kind of place that, like, it sounds like what was that great movie in Scotland, the one with Burt Lancaster and the American guy, Local Hero. You know what I mean? He goes to that village and it's just like all of these wacky things where everybody seems to be doing multiple things and everybody knows each other, right? That was the feeling you get when you're in Takanabe. So Fujisawa-san, again, an absolutely lovely, lovely dude. Yet maybe the 25th member of our I Am Analog Club. He's only got the phone in the place. He's got no website. He's got no internet. If you want to reach him, you've got to call when he's either making the curry at lunchtime or at night. So again, it was really hard to check the opening hours. I think I had a lot of calls back with him too when you were going afterwards. But and then the last bit that, again, another place. This is the third place on our top 10 where the Art Ensemble of Chicago just happened to pop up. I mean, Philip, it's crazy. We were talking about them up in Almery, and then he pulls out in his photo album a picture of him with the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and they're drinking it together. And I'm like, these guys got all around Japan, and everywhere they went, they were hitting that sake. Or in Kyushu, I guess they were hitting the shochu. So Dolphy to me was such a shock, not just because of all the cool, beautiful things that I mentioned, including a picture of Ornette Coleman on stage in Kyushu that he took himself, and he's got it framed. But it was just more that, like, again, this was a place that I knew nothing about. I mean, absolutely nothing before going there. And then spending that sort of 90 minutes with him, all of his like quirky stories. He was really, really chatty. Everybody down in Kyushu is really chatty, you know? And then the sort of like that combination of the jazz and like the local sort of like this place being a place where all his friends just come out, and why you've got all this amazing collection of scotch. I don't have any notes in my diary about scotch. I don't know if you talked to him about it, where's he's getting the Bruichladdich from, because that's not something you find very easily. But yeah, Dolphy and Miyazaki, to me, an all-time great place. And certainly, I would say the quirkiest location. I mean, Philip, you definitely remember how it's literally surrounded by nothing. Takanabe, there is nothing there. So it was actually in contention to be number one. It didn't make it there, but it did make it to number 3 because I would say it was the most surprising and most wonderful place that I experienced throughout our 10 years of TJJ.
Interesting. Very interesting choice. I mean, I'd say that's the first place of all the places. Well, maybe Jab also, but where I'm really quite surprised that made it in. But I mean, again, like we said before, I said previously, I mean, it's an impossible task. So, you know, something has to give and other things have to be in. But it's really interesting to me that you went with that one because, yeah, I mean, I obviously went up on your recommendation and had a really interesting experience. I mean, he was chatty, but it's funny you mentioned the mayor because the mayor was there when I got there. The mayor was having lunch.
Great.
Because he said, "Oh, I'm the mayor." He said, "What are you doing?" You know, welcome to. I
forgot that.
Welcome to Takanabe.
I forgot that. Yeah.
But you know, it's just like you say, one of those places. I mean, there's a much longer chat about Dolphy if you're interested in one of the preceding episodes. But just looking through some of the photos, I mean, apart from the things you've mentioned there, some of the things that kind of stand out is this sort of slightly problematic decor in the bathroom where you've got sort of any album cover, including that Blind Faith album cover.
Oh dear, yes, yes.
Bathroom on the bathroom wall. You've got Queen bicycle races. You've got Electric Ladyland. But I mean, again, I think if you've listened to that episode, you'll know the story already. But I mean, when I told him I was going to downbeat round the corner, or more or less round the corner, a distance that you or I would not think twice about walking, he was like, no, I must insist. And, you know, he gave me a lift. And it was one of the world's messiest cars. But apart from that, you know, it just totally randomly, which again, I think even for Japan it seems quite shocking to me. But on the back of his car, just near the petrol cap, there's quite a large rendering of that alligator from the Hampton Hawes album.
Yes, which you see so many
sitting
places.
Sitting at a table, drinking a glass of wine and tapping its foot. And it's painted on it's painted on the car.
Incredible.
With
Incredible.
acrylic paint or whatever. Like, so it's so kind of random and such a. But I it's funny because I had this kind of impression, which I think I talked about before. But there was a sadness about this guy that I think I got much more than some other places that you get. It was kind of like there was a sense of like reckoning, like this is coming to the end. He talked about the customers not being there anymore. Even the whiskies, he said he'd had a few offers on some whiskies because like some of these whiskies are probably quite rare and there's maybe one or two shots left in them, but he said, oh yeah, people have made me offers for this and that.
Yeah, that's interesting because because even though when I was there during that COVID time, and it was like there were no tourists, but the locals were still, it's funny. People always have that silly stereotype about the Japanese. Oh, they always follow all the rules. Like, please, I spent time in Kyushu and Osaka. Japanese people don't follow the rules, just like anywhere else, okay? I mean, yes, they might wait for the stoplight, but like, there was this idea that like during COVID, it's like, oh, well, you're not supposed to have more than like 8 people in a shop. And, he told me, he's like, oh no, we were completely full last night. But I mean, it was a good couple years after I went that you visited, and I'm wondering if maybe things had taken a downturn. I mean, we know the local economy here is very sluggish, et cetera, et cetera. Prices have gone up, so it's a little harder. And I would imagine, like, if you're again that whiskey collection with the weak yen, I mean, those are expensive bottles of whiskey, man. He had, I think he had 6 different Buclodics, and most of those are easily above 7,000 or 8,000 yen per bottle. Right? Like when you're buying wholesale. So, I mean, whatever he would sell to the customers is more than that. Yeah, people
are old as well, right? So, I mean, that's the point. Like some of them are old bottles, right? It's not like they're all new bottles. I think that's the appeal, right? Some bottles sitting there from 20 years ago or 30 years ago potentially.
Well, no, but that's the thing. Like as well, like it's hard to keep that going, even if you focus more on the sort of shot bar aspect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, like Miyazaki, very distant. Takanabe, even more distant. I wonder if that is why the curry lunch menu, which I've just sent you a picture of, by the way, because it's got a lovely.
Yeah, I had it.
It's got the great English. Okay, everybody likes curry rice, and I felt like saying, well, not everybody, but
not everybody. Most normal people, most.
But I'm wondering if he is like making more than half his money by doing that, and it seems that he writes a lot about that. On people in the blogs have said like he really likes talking about the curry rice he makes. So I wonder if he's maybe transitioning more into the restaurant, and the evening bar is just sort of like for fun. Dolphy, yeah, for me, like the memory of that, and that whole Miyazaki trip for me was just mental for a cajillion reasons, involving missed trains and rainstorms and being lost, and it was just one of those stressful but wonderful trips. And Dolphy was definitely the highlight. And the last bit about Dolphy is, so I'm glad that you met the mayor. So he makes a shochu that's called 100 Years of Solitude, which is after the Gabriel Garcia Marquez novel, which I actually just read for the first time. For some reason, I never read it through all these years. So the label on the shochu, the name of it is after that novel, but he uses the Dolphy quote, the famous, when you hear music after it's over, it's gone in the air. You can never capture it again. And I was thinking, I don't even drink shochu, and I still got to get a bottle of that next time I'm down there. So yeah, Dolphy, an old-timer.
Really nice, yeah. I mean, we've talked again. I don't want to talk too much about it because we have talked about it in another episode, obviously. But such is the nature of like a top 10 review. You're going to repeat yourself a little bit. But like you say, it's out in that slightly strange kind of industrial area. But equally, there are businesses and companies out there. I mean, when it wasn't only the mayor, there was a fairly rough and ready kind of guy with work clothes on who just finished his lunch as well when I was there. So, there's probably an argument that you make a bit of money at lunchtime and then, I guess he closes up and reopens in the evening. But I mean, like with all these places, that we've talked about, particularly in areas like that, it's just not, it's not the bubble years. It's not the early 2000s even. It's just, time moves on and these guys are getting old and that's kind of the nature of it. But in terms of just pure collectability and sort of insane amounts of like stuff, like collectible stuff, not like clutter, but like stuff that's all like well presented, like hung on the walls, like, because you were talking about the photo album. I mean, even on the way to the toilet, there's a huge wall with little beautifully fitted shelves that have individual photographs inside these little glass cases, and they're all displayed along that wall as if, you know, the way that you would display like CDs or records on a wall. So all along there you can see all those same photos, or a selection of them, and you know, there's just so much attention to detail.
And he was one of those guys that like, and we've met a lot of Japanese collectors like this. He has, I think, 6 copies of Out to Lunch. Everyone is different. You know, Japanese press, American press, the one the one with the wrong label, the one with the wrong mix. You know what I mean? And I think he showed me 4 versions of Let It Be that he had. The same thing with the Beatles, like the Beatles collectors.
Who's that by?
Japan go crazy. It's a band. They're from Liverpool. I don't know if you ever heard of them. I know you're like, you're more of like a Manchester like Smiths guy. I know, but like, they're called the Beatles. Really good.
Oasis,
you should check them out.
More my bag.
You should check them out. But he had that, like, it was really funny because I've got underlined in my notes, like with 3 lines. He got an extra line. Dude loves classic rock as well, which, as I do. I wish I could have spent more time there, but again, because
Explains the guitars,
the train being what it was, and he actually called a cab for me. He didn't drive me in his cluttered car. He called a cab for me, but he knew the cab driver, so the guy didn't put the extra rate on for like a call. So yeah, again, always friendly when you get down to the regions in Japan. But
nice, amazing, nice choice. Yeah, not one I saw coming. So that leaves me, and probably the first with the first incident, I guess, of slightly stolen thunder on this top 10 countdown. It's amazing that we've avoided it so far, but my number 3 choice, inevitably, for me at least, is a place that we talked about in the number 5 episode, which is Elven. So my number 3 choice is Elven. And I know you covered a lot about Elven, so at the risk of sort of repeating myself, I think for me, Elven, the choice of Elven for me was, well, there were several reasons, and I was thinking about recently, you know, a part of this project for both of us, I think, and then increasingly since I left Japan and came back, you know, is, and you sometimes feel this like you feel it very viscerally when you're actually doing it, and I think the first time that I experienced it probably was Basie, and then obviously we had this crazy day in Fukuoka, starting in Fukuoka, but around Kyushu. And then we've had a few since, notably, you know, jumping on a boat to cross over in Nagasaki and so on. And I think part of this journey is the journey itself. You know, part of the kind of experience is the effort, is the time. I mean, not to the point where you're deliberately, you know, choosing a slow train or you're deliberately making it difficult, but like a lot of the places that, and you know, Dolphy's even a good example where you look on a map and you think, oh, it's quite close to Miyazaki, but you've got to take an irregular train up there, and when you get there, then you still got to get to this place, and as soon as you get there, you're like, how the hell do I get back to the station? And if you get back to the station at the wrong time, then you're sitting in this empty station with like nothing to do for like an hour or longer. So I think for me, part of it is the journey, and Elven stands out for me as probably, you know, the most perfect example of that, because actually you had talked about being at Elven. I think on a previous trip I had tried, it was on my list. I was like, right, I need to try and get to Elven, but it just, no matter what way I looked at it with Google Maps, it just always seemed too far. Like it just, you know, you're like, I must have some settings on where it's like cutting out this or it's cutting out that. And then like, how can it be this far from like even Sendai, which, you know, is obviously quite close to Tokyo on a train. And actually, you know, to take it kind of to the ridiculous extent, as it happens that morning, I was in Miyazaki that you were talking about with Dolphy. So I had stayed there.
I forgot that was your crazy.
Yeah, so I was in Miyazaki, and I got to the airport, and I got to the airport for the first flight to Haneda, and the airport was still closed. So I remember standing outside. Thank God it's a sort of a warmer, more like kind of tropical place. But I was standing outside the airport, queuing with some people, and then eventually, you know, some guy comes over and he like opens the door, and like everyone sort of I say everyone. I mean, there's not many people, but you know, people kind of pile into the airport, and you know, check in, blah blah blah, and within a couple of hours or whatever, I was in Haneda. But then I had to make my way from Haneda across to Tokyo Station. And I remember as well the time of year, like I had misjudged the weather, basically. It was quite warm. I think it was maybe February, but it was quite warm for the time of year. And so I was wearing like heat tech, and I was like just sweating like an absolute, like I was like, this is horrific. But you just keep going, right? Because you're like, I've got to get this Shinkansen, because I'd worked out the route. So I got to Tokyo Station, got the Shinkansen, and then, you sit for an hour and you can relax. Then you're in Sendai. But then from Sendai, you have to take another local train. So, you get to Sendai, I've got to dump my bags because I'm staying there that night, get my locker key. I'm like, okay, feeling lighter. Here we go. You take this local train to a place called Nita. It's slow, one of these trains, there's like school kids on it, and it's like, oh my God. And when you get to the station, and I know you talked about in the last one, we took a slightly different route, but I got to this Nita. The reason then from there you can't go any further is because there's no longer trains that go to where Elven is. So, and I've talked about this on the previous episode of the podcast, but like for the benefit of those who haven't heard it, I was like, okay, so taxi? Of course, there's no taxis. So then I've got to find coins to call, and I got to the phone box outside the station, and I'm like, okay, well, here's the taxi number. So I call, and I can see across the street there's a house with a taxi in the driveway. So I'm like, okay, well, there must be somebody who can like take me, right? And I called this taxi firm, and the woman obviously was like just baffled. She's like, there's someone calling for a taxi at like, I don't know, whatever time it was, 11:30 or 12, just like, and she said, oh, I guess it was maybe her husband. She's like, oh, sorry, he's out on another job. And I was like, okay. She said, but he'll be on his way soon, so just wait there. So I just standing at the station, and then lo and behold, of course, this taxi turns up. And it's a good 20 minutes in this taxi. And I had this beautiful chat, this guy, very poignant. We talked about dogs and how like he had lost his dog, and how like they bring you all this joy. And we talked about the weather, because like we're going through these fields that had no snow on them in February. And he was like, this is not good, because these used to be covered in snow. And you finally get to Elven, and this is like 5 or 6 hours later. I think I calculated it once. It's sort of like 16 or 1800 kilometers like distance, and you think, at different stages of this journey, like, what are you doing? Like, this is insane. Like, this is how you're... Now, obviously, I'm in a different situation now. I'm not living there. Like, I have this pressure of making the time count and getting the best out of my trip, and wanting to see these places. And we were also conscious that Elven has quite reasonably limited opening hours. So it's like, okay, like, don't miss Elven. And I mean, I think of all the places, in terms of distance and the journey up there, but also in terms of the return. Like when I walked into Elven, I mean, you come along, and you'll see this in some of the photographs, but you come along this very plain, very suburban street. There's this old Coca-Cola sign that says Elven. There's like a surfboard outside that's like upright, like attached as a sign that also says Elven.
That's inexplicable. Like,
bizarre, right?
The least
something.
Likely place you would ever consider anybody would be surfing is Tomei City.
I mean, there's definitely
in Miyagi.
no waves, right?
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah.
So you go down this little side door, and like you talked about it in the last, you go in, it's this cavernous place. And I mean, I think what stood out for me, first of all, I had like a good bit of time. I had a good couple of hours, because again, and I having done this many times on my own and also with you, I was like, okay, this is not one of those situations where you let a taxi driver go. So like as I was getting out of the taxi driver, I said, can you come back and pick me up at whatever time it was? And I had a good couple of hours. So, for once it was more relaxing. I went in, Carlos greeted me. He was very friendly. I chatted about you having come up, and then of course he pulled out his phone and he had a picture of you. He was like, this guy. I was like, yes, that's him. And we chatted. And the overwhelming memory of it is, I sat right down at the back. It's just, there's so much to look at. Like, there's just so much stuff everywhere, like just jazz history, Japanese jazz kisa history, memorabilia. And then you look down, and we talked about this at the end of the episode where you picked Elvin. There's this, and I've often talked about these places being kind of almost like pseudo-sacred, like there's kind of pseudo-religious spaces. And to me, again, like photographically, the best example, is you have these enormous speakers, and then in the middle you have like almost like a relic, like a holy relic. You have this kind of top-lit copy of Heavy Sounds by Elvin Jones and Richard Davis. And, you just get this sense, the name, everything. This place is a temple, to Elvin Jones. I mean, even more possibly than Basie, in the sense that you just see Elvin Jones everywhere. Like you come in, there's a signed leather jacket in the hallway, there's signed photographs, it's got Elvin Jones live at the town halls up in the middle of one of the walls, there's posters, there's photographs. And then you sit there and there's just this volume is just washing over you, like this music. And he kept getting up, and then it was like, there was Modern Jazz Quartet, then it was like Red Rodney, and there was just this constant mixture of kind of styles and records. But the overwhelming thing was just the volume. And every so often a customer, like a local customer, would come in, have their afternoon coffee, just sit. And again, the seats are all arranged towards the speakers. His wife was over there on her phone. She nipped out every so often when the little buzzer rang for the butcher shop next door, and she would come back in, and he just sat there, and like between chatting to the customer and chatting to me, he just like nodding his head, just vibing. And then, then it's over. As quick as it starts, you're like, okay, I gotta go. And again, he walked me out, and I'd always remember this. I always will remember this. And I've talked about it. I did like a little presentation performance thing at a conference about it, but like he just walked me out to the taxi, and I said the volume, he said the sound was amazing. He said, look, the point of these places is that if you can't go to a gig, if you can't go to a live concert, you come out of here feeling like you've been at one. And I was like, it was one of those light bulb moments, because you're like, well, that's exactly it. Like, that's it in a nutshell. Like, never mind your listening bars, never mind your fancy cocktails. It's like these places are about music. They're about the sound. They're about just listening to music the way that it was recorded, and listening to it in such a way and with such quality that actually you just hear every instrument, and it's like you're sitting in the front row of a gig. And it was one of those like eureka moments where I was like, I'll never forget this. And all the other stuff, all the money, the taxis, the cost of flights, the time, the sweat in Tokyo Station, it all just kind of like fades away. You're like, and you come out, it's just, what a high, like what a buzz. And I just think I would travel twice the distance for this experience, because you really can't really ever encapsulate it, whether it's in a podcast or a photograph or a film. The only way is to go and experience it and just like feel it yourself. So that's why Elvin was my top 3. Excellent. Number 3 choice.
Bravo. I can't add a thing. I mean, and again, yeah, even though it was my number 5, we've talked about it on the original trip. We talked about it 2 episodes ago. I could do another hour on Elvin easily. I mean, everything you said, just amazing. What a unique and quirky and wonderful fella. It's funny though, because you were saying, I mean, everything you said is I agree with. But one of the things that was really funny was when you talked about like the limited opening hours. I wouldn't say limited. I would just say like unclear and inconsistent. And for anybody out there who uses, and I highly recommend you do not rely on Google Maps for any opening hours of Jazzkissa, okay? If you're looking at a department store in Japan, yes. If you're talking about Jazzkissa, do not rely on that, because if you look at, I'm looking at it right now, it's Elvin Jazzkissa in Tome City, and it says open from 9 a.m., and I'm like, there's no way if you show up there at 9 a.m., that guy's going to be there. The butcher shop is going to be open from 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Right? So what you're going to be doing is going into the butcher shop and then telling the old lady there, like his wife, be like, hey, actually, can I get a cup of coffee and hear some jazz? And she's going to have to go wake up Carlos son in the back and be like, oh, there's some weird dude here who wants to open the jazz cafe, right? So yeah, always make your phone calls before you go. But yeah, everything about Elvin is just again an only in Japan experience, and just the pure like. Once again, all of the jazz joints that we go to, we know. I mean, you don't open a jazz, whether it's a kissa, a bar, or a club, if you don't love the music. But to me, it's like the depth of the love that these people have still impresses me. And we've been doing this for 20 years. I've been going to these places 23 years now, right?
Well, this is where it comes into it. To me, it's religion. You know, like it's a faith.
Oh,
it's just a faith. Yeah. It's an unwavering 100%. Belief, and it's like a mission.
Got a lot more along those lines too coming up, but yeah, absolutely, yeah. Elvin is an absolute treasure, and yeah, I'm almost like you were saying on I think 2 episodes ago. You know, maybe hearing each other's choices makes you rethink some things, and now I'm thinking like, wow, yeah, I had it at 5. Easily could have been higher than that. You know,
it's impossible. And in many ways, you know, you could probably justify, you know, rejigging even the top 10 because like there's other things that come back to you. And I think that's kind of that's testament to just the richness of this culture is that, you know, you still,
you know,
even trying to fit them into that number, you know, there's other things you could say, well, you know, far and away, these are the best or this is the top 10, but it's almost an impossible task. And the more,
you know, like we were thinking like, I think we mentioned it on the episode we did when we had our very, very epic Kyushu, the second epic Kyushu day when we went to Jazz Inn's Dolphy. Do you remember the really lovely couple? They were just finishing up a gig. And I think on that episode, I said something like, imagine you were like you or I. You come over to Japan, you're 22. You come over as an English teacher. You don't speak the language, but you like music. And you just happen to be located next door to like a place like Jazz Inn Dolphy. Right. And you go in there one night and he's playing vinyl and serving whiskey. And then there's a live gig. You would think that you discovered the single greatest joint in the entire world. You know what I mean? You would just be like, I can't believe how lucky I am to be living next door to this place. This is the coolest place I've ever seen. And then to slowly discover that like, it's just one of like hundreds. That's the incredible beauty of jazz and jazz joints in Japan. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously we're on episode number 108 now. So, you know, the love that we have for it is very clear, but like, yeah, you just can't say it enough. It is so special. So yeah, fantastic joint and fantastic pick. And yeah, we're getting into it now, man. We've got 2 more to go. I'm
very nervous, but
eager to hear.
Yeah, with 2 more weeks and 2 more episodes. And that was episode 108, which means we've got 109, 110 left. And of course, if you're as good at maths as me, you'll know that 109 actually means number 2 spot, and then certainly the one that I've been waiting for, and I presume James has in particular, is the number 1 spot, which will be episode 110, and then we'll take a break from the podcast for a few weeks at least, if not a month or 2, just to regroup. But we hope you've been enjoying this Tokyo Jazz Joints Top of the Pops Top 10 countdown. And as much as we have, it's been really nice to revisit some of these places. It's been nice to kind of reminisce about them and to reassess what our favorites are. And James, I will talk to you next week for episode 109. In the meantime,
I thought, did you just drop off?
I was just stay
groovy, everyone. I'm sorry. Was that waiting for like one of my slogans?
Sort of casual way.
Oh, I see. I thought one of my catchphrases, like "Stay cool, everybody." Get my podcast.
Yeah, I was sort of hoping you would come in and say, "Yep, absolutely, we will talk again soon." Yeah. But no,
I'm struggling with that toothache still. You know what I mean? But okay, talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, take it easy.
All right, bye.